All right, welcome to the show. Charles Moscowitz here. Dooovid is my guest. Doovid's a regular YouTube host. We often talk Jewish issues, American Jewish issues, etc. Doovid, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Doovid, you sent me an article from the Times of Israel, The Ethical Cost of Jewish Communal Support for Donald Trump, um, which I read the article that you just sent it. I have to say, I think it's ridiculous, but having said that, I want to just state as a matter of record that President Trump increased his vote among American Jews pretty substantially. I think it was like 4 or 5 percentage points, and that's of course of the vote that we know about. Um, and in fact, he increased his vote among all minority segments, and the only group by which he lost ground was white men. And I think it's significant in terms of getting closer to his true constituency. Now, I'd like you to weigh in a bit, if you don't mind, on this article and on some of the points that this rabbi raises.
Yes, I think that's Rabbi Lau's son. So it's a pretty prominent rabbi, and he's going back and forth where there's plenty of reasons why Jews, especially Orthodox Jews or people who support Israel and Zionists, support Trump. However, there's a lot of legitimate complaints about Trump from all sorts of levels, just of what we talked about last week, and not even just like what's behavior becoming or unbecoming of a Jew or the type values you want represented, but certain levels of corruption or message, and how good is it to be involved with someone who displays what to a lot of Jews would just be considered despicable behavior, like just attacking people, belittling people in public, teasing people. And even if you grant that Trump is winning for us, that yes, Trump did all these things for the Jews, and no one else would have been able to do that. What are the effect of getting into a deal like that? And especially me and you, we love Jewish history. Kevin McDonald, is that legitimately our group strategy? And that we as a collective negotiate deals with the leadership of the nations we reside, and try to get our best interest met, as opposed to post modern, where citizens, we're not so to say citizens equal with the United States, where American Jews, I'm sure the Rabbi Soloveitchik's hyphened American Jew, but however you interpret it, is it good that we negotiate en masse and have a few issues that we push through in return for supporting politicians? Or is it better that we don't affiliate and work together as Jews to push a political agenda? And Rabbi Lau is assuming, like, of course, this is what we do. This is what Jews have always done. This is our strategy. But even within his school, that's saying, like, yes, as Jews, we collectively bargain together with world leaders to get our interest met. What's the price at the end of the day of working together with a guy like President Trump, even if you grant all the, so to say, glorious things he's done for Israel?
I think that it's a great price. I mean, I think that if you want to look at the Jewish community of America collectively, and as in a position of bargain, their position clearly and overwhelmingly was against Trump and for Biden. And yet Jewish citizens broke with their leadership and voted for Trump, and they're now scratching their heads and wondering why. I think that they are dead wrong. The Trump presidency and his administration represents the best interests of Jews and of America, which is why more Jews supported him. Not just when it comes to the state of Israel, where he's presided over the Abraham Accords, and that resulted in a peace treaty between Israel and two Arab nations, and now a third, that being Sudan, not to mention Kosovo, which is a Muslim nation, and the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem. But the fact is that domestically, he stood for a pro-American position. I mean, putting America first, which is something that American Jews, I think, are increasingly gravitating toward and should gravitate toward. And this is all not to mention the fact, and I know this is more cosmetic and it doesn't really matter, but these things do matter in our nation, a culture of ethnic identity politics, is the fact that he's got a Jewish daughter and son-in-law and Jewish grandchildren.
Yeah, so does Biden. But
He does? Who? Biden has Jewish children? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
I'm pretty sure his daughter-in-law is a full Jew, although you'd have to look that up. I'm not an expert in that.
Okay.
And there might even be, but even accepting that, if you're saying that your average Jew cringes at the leadership of Donald Trump, and so if you separated method and style versus delivery, and we talked a few weeks ago, we don't have to repeat why, to most Jews the major issues are anti-racism, immigration, multiculturalism, various repair the world activities. That's the major. You're not necessarily of an organized base of Jewry, but that represents the values of the majority of American Jews, secular leftist leanings, why they wouldn't like a figure like Donald Trump that may or may not have anything to do with their Judaism and might in fact more have, so to say, to do with the rejection of their Judaism, why things like immigration or anti-racism are so important in the value system. But given that, like, a deal with the devil. So if you're in New York, like I lived in New York and I did a lot of work. Like I was a day trader. I did building permits. I worked together with all sorts of businessmen. And basically at a certain point, like almost everybody is caught up in the mafia, especially in construction and stocks. And even the question, like, what does that mean? But at the end of the day, if you need partners and you want partners who you have a solid, strong relationship, and then maybe they're questionable strongman or have a lot of people saying bad things about them, but it's like you go to synagogue and you would say like, okay, like you don't want to make other people cringe. You say, okay, but he's their guy, he won for him, he did a lot of things, but you're saying like, oh man, you got to constantly be reminded of what this guy's doing for you, because his behavior is just so off-putting. And if you're saying like, no, you don't even see that Trump's behavior is off-putting, or you're saying yes, you see that, but you think it's the demand of the current situation of so to say, kind of like being at battle where you're not expecting people to be gentlemen.
First of all, Jews in this country have voted left going all the way back to Franklin Roosevelt, and they voted Democratic in every election. The whole thing that's interesting about this one is that they did less so this time around than they have done in recent decades.
But not much. I mean, what percent are you talking? You're talking
4
like
or 5%, which I
mean, but I'm saying still the overwhelming.
I thought that if Trump could peel off even 2% of the Jewish vote, he would have a huge victory. So it's actually quite a bit more than most people projected who thought that he'd do better. And that Jews have generally in this country voted socialist. And that might be changing because I think the Jews are waking up to various thoughts on whether or not the socialist position is one that repairs the world or is good for anyone. Open borders is not necessarily a great idea for anyone, certainly not a great idea for Israel. So let's not be hypocritical, or let's be consistent here, and say, if it's Israel needs to have control of their borders, so don't all sovereign nations. The whole idea of sovereignty, I would suggest, is a progressive idea. And I think more Jews are starting to think about that. In terms of racism, Trump did better in among all races. I mean, he got almost doubled his vote amongst the African American community and the Hispanic community. I don't know about the Asians, but he actually did even better among Native Americans. So, that whole lie, I think, is being put to rest. This whole piece of propaganda from the left, which they push at everyone who doesn't genuflect in their direction, but they particularly ramped up with Trump, that he's got something against minorities, which is a damn lie.
Well, and that's why I'm not so much into politics, because it necessitates framing where if you say, maybe there's a middle ground in a field, but strategically you want to claim victory in totality. So both people purposely speak past each other. Like Luke Ford was mentioning, I've been on his show a few times this week, and he's covering the voter fraud. And I was saying it depends on how you define fraud. So the experts say voter fraud is not an issue in terms of how many dead people are voting, how many fake ballots are there, and in terms of that. But in terms of Trump winning the election, um, large parts of what was done in mail-in ballots or extension deadlines has to be changed. And in order for Trump to win the election, he has to use the word fraud because it's the way of setting the frame. So there's no middle ground. So it's like you lie. There's no evidence of voter fraud, and so it's just like a definition game. And so in all of the politics, just like Trump, the negotiating style, and if we're mentioning like Jews, if it's good for us to collectively negotiate, so it's say like, yeah, Trump is weak right now, and Republican Jews should be demanding from Trump that he do more and saying like, okay, we backed you. You might be losing. There's a small chance that somehow you're going to win. But if you win, like we're going to demand much more than he did the first 4 years.
Well, I think if he wins, he's going to be in a position to do much more because he'll get rid of all these traitors that are honeycombing his administration. But as far as
he's not unlikely to find new people. I'm saying like Trump at this point is like anyone who even if Trump wins and he's got to find new people, like there's not going to be any good people lining up to work for Trump. And it could be there's not any good people left. And it's saying like Trump.
No, I disagree. But
he's really a flawed person. Like you can't, even Biden, he's probably easier to work with Biden.
I reject that. But I mean, look, Dooovid, you say that it depends.
I'm not saying I'm a talented guy. I could do a lot of things, and like, no, I don't see how I could work together with Trump. I could imagine if I was given a task and it was delegated, and even
very talented people around him who are doing incredible jobs. I'd mentioned Mnuchin as Secretary of Treasury, Pompeo as Secretary of State. These are amazing people doing incredible things. But putting that aside, when you say it depends on how you define fraud, fraud is it's something that runs contrary to the principle of one man, one vote. If there is a vote cast that doesn't have a legitimate person behind it, and when I say legitimate, I mean a registered voter, then that's fraud because they are misrepresenting themselves. And by the way, that's a crime. That's a crime where one can actually serve time for if they vote erroneously and deliberately. I mean, fraud is not something that's up for interpretation. It's a violation of the law. Now, if people are voting from the graveyards, as they apparently have done by the huge numbers in Nevada, or if you have manipulation of computers, you might want to comment on this, Dooovid, because you're from Michigan. In Michigan, Antrim County, which is in the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, there was a local Republican candidate who only got 2 votes, and he knew that he had gotten more than 2 votes because there were 6 members of his family who voted for him. So he challenged that vote. And what was discovered was that the county was using this domain tabulation system, and that the domain tabulation system had some kind of what they call a glitch. Now, whether or not that's deliberate or whether it's some technical thing, I don't really care. The fact of the matter is that it took 6,000 votes for Trump and it turned them toward votes for Biden and other Republicans. And that was fixed after the county did a hand count of the vote and discovered this. Now it turns out that over 40 counties in Michigan are using this same system, and that there's a second county somewhere in East Michigan on the shore of Lake Michigan that also has some improprieties with regard to the use of this domain system. Now we find out that this domain system is in 6 states. Ironically, all 6 of those states are the swing states: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Georgia. Maybe even some other states, but those are the ones that have been defined. And that the same domain system that switched those votes to Biden, apparently the owner and founder and inventor of this system, a man by the name of Kumar, I think his name is I don't have his first. Oh, Eric Kumar is a radical leftist who supports Antifa, and that the main investor in the company is the husband of Dianne Feinstein, senator from California, and one of the managers of the company is the son of Nancy Pelosi. So there are some connections between this domain system. There are some financial connections between this domain system. There is now suspicion that this domain system stole the election from Bernie Sanders, who does nothing about it because he's not like Trump. He's nice. He doesn't stand up. But when they've done this now to Trump, he is standing up. And I think apparently, not today, but tomorrow, there's going to be some major information coming out about this scandal. What do you think of this? You're in Michigan. Have you heard anything about it?
No, nothing. Just what's in the paper. I mean, I know some of my leftist Jewish friends were active in organizing for this, and may have even been counters. In fact, I have this woman on my YouTube channel who was a Detroit public official that spoke at events that I've recorded before, that I think was head of the vote count at TFC. And, I mean, she's almost certainly a leftist, but relatively honest. I don't know. I mean, saying I'm opposed to the system in general. I have no confidence in democracy, and generally pretty skeptical about human nature. So whether this is true or not, what's going to happen? And I was, just as I was listening to, I think like this is probably why I became a Hindu, was because the Hindu conception of this was maybe more powerful than the Jewish conception, with kind of what they call Maya, as like the physical realm or illusion. And people have three basic components of the material realm they fall into, which is ignorance, passion, and goodness that attach us to the material realm. Most people dwell in passion and ignorance and rarely come to goodness. And if you think like a movie or something, like a person's life, where a person is, I'm filling my duty as a man to the state and am a good person that made sense, that my creator brought myself into this world. And that very rarely does a person actually stay at that level of goodness where they could say it made sense that the creator put me in this world because I'm a good person, I'm doing good. And the majority of time, man is in the realm of passion and ignorance, just chasing our passions or stupidities. And so politics, in theory, could be in the mode of goodness, where it's saying, I really just want to make the world a better place and fulfill my duty as a man to my creator, to society, to my neighbors. But the nature of elections is, probably like in the small single digit percents is actually in the mode of goodness. Almost all the rest is in ignorance and passion. So as the Orthodox Jewish perspective, they don't, I mean, the Kabbalistic or conception, how politics come in and kind of just resigning to that God controls the heart and mind of our leaders, and but also has a conception that politics is basically bad character. The people who get into politics because they have bad character. But Hashem has the system worked in a way that, as the prophets use and the sages use, where the evil people do all the work, and then God flips the plan so the righteous get the reward. And from the counter Semites, it's like, like, Charles, we're Jews. You're saying like, you do all the work, I make all the money. I'm sorry, that's the way God designed it. But from the the way the text are speaking, like, there's no such thing as a politician who honestly likes the Jews and does our bidding because he's a righteous person. At best, there's a person who tried to do their own bidding, but God worked it in a certain way that at the end of what happened, the righteous got their reward and the wicked got their punishment. So I don't mind politics, but I like issues like what's affecting humanity, what makes the world a better place. I can't even get into the mode where I'm interested to get behind one person or the other. To me, it's just upsetting. And it almost, to me, the Hindu conception, it's like, just wants to drag me into ignorance and passion, or some sort of Judeo Kabbalistic, is just dragging at my base negative character traits.
Well, look, I mean, I agree with you that most politicians, in fact, all politicians, are tempted by the evil side, and that's why we have a nation of laws and not men. That's why the founding generation came up with this brilliant conception of developing a system of laws that separate powers and balance powers, and it is completely consistent with the Torah and with the the New Testament teachings as well. I mean, it's a brilliant system. Now, I think that it's the Jewish understanding that there is such a thing as existence. God created the universe. God created all things, both physical and abstract, and that they can be identified. And we can know them and we can know their nature, whether they're good or evil to a certain extent. We can't know everything, but we have certain faculties, and that is part of our mission. That's why God put us here, to identify good and to identify evil, and to do so as a way to improving the world that will never be perfect until the Messiah comes. Now, the idea that there is such a thing as corruption in any society, it is our obligation as Jews and as human beings to try to identify that, to try to call it out, and to try to bring it to justice. And what would there's no more important a subject that we can deal with right now, for better or for worse, than whether or not there has been a systematic and organized conspiracy to overthrow this government and to steal this election. I mean, that is something that, I think by any definition can be described as evil, because it's dealing in a falsehood, it's dealing in creating an illusion that's untrue.
I don't like the good and evil, because it's let's say you're right, there's good chance, and even your last person on is very interesting, and I'm also of the opinion that coronavirus may or is likely to have been man-made. And if you're telling me that there's um conflicting forces that may purposely be doing this to us, even in the sense that someone hated humanity so much that they created coronavirus purposely to do this to us, or that there's other forces in the world that purposely meddling in our elections to sow discord. um I don't know if I wouldn't frame it good and evil, um because I'm a more rational actor, uh believer,
Well,
that
all right,
the opposing side who's doing it, it's
yeah.
just group
Look, look,
conflict,
look,
struggle for resources. So they're
I would
not
agree that
evil.
that's an
They're
issue
not
of judgment.
you're
Like,
saying
for
they're just
example,
looking at a power grab and saying, why should you have power? I'm going to cheat. So it's just like cheating doesn't make you evil. Cheating is just a strategy to win.
depends on why you're cheating. Look, and I agree with you that to overthrow a government and to use deception to do that is not necessarily evil. In fact, it could be good. Like, for example, the conspiracy to overthrow Adolf Hitler. That was good. It was a conspiracy. The conspiracy on the part of the Boston Tea Party to challenge the king with his taxation, I would argue, was good. So, we could say that these things are in the eyes of the beholder, and that we have to make a case
Well, you're saying even
for why
the
we think
majority
something
of
is
nations
good,
would benefit from the overthrow of the U.S. government, and there's hundreds of NGOs, non-governmental organizations that are extremely powerful that would probably also benefit from the overthrow of the U.S. government. That it has to be
I'm
someone
sure they
evil.
would.
You could just look. It could be any number of tens of various countries or hundreds of NGOs that would benefit from the downfall of America.
Look, I think that in this country, since the establishment of the Constitution, we want to see the will of the people expressed through their electors in terms of who becomes the next president of the United States. And if there is an attempt to subvert that for any reason, I would argue that it's wrong and evil. And, regardless of who benefits or doesn't. Now, if it turns out that Biden won the election fair and square, then I will be the first one to recognize him as the president of the United States. But there are serious questions right now afoot with regard to whether or not this has been a stolen election, whether or not there has been a deliberate attempt to do that by people who want to do it and who have a motivation to do it. And if that is the case, we have to get to the bottom of that, because if we don't, and we allow that to happen, then we're going to have allowed this evil agenda to obtain power. And that is a very dangerous thing. Now,
Just
again,
because you use the word evil, it makes the conversation difficult because it's
Well,
saying like,
I'm defining what I mean by evil, which is the use of deception to overthrow a government that was elected by the people.
well, then call it
Regardless of
deception,
whether
not
that-
evil, because like you want to describe what it is, and evil, you're saying like, therefore, the people who did this should be, God forbid, tortured and murdered.
We didn't.
And
We
I'm
didn't
about
know about it. It may not let it happen. I don't think anyone needs to be tortured, and I don't
But I
think.
mean, it's your worst use of the word evil. So
Well, I do use the word evil, unless you think that Donald
I'm saying
Trump.
when you use the word evil, so you say like evil, like meaning that they deserve to die, a
No,
horrible death.
look, some people think that Donald Trump is as evil as Hitler, and that's why they justify this conspiracy. I reject that.
Well,
I
I'm
don't
saying,
think
God forbid that the people would not be upset or would even favor, even, God forbid, our president dying a horrible death, because that's the nature of the negative spirit of humanity and hatred.
Well,
That when you say
those
the
are
word
natural things.
evil,
We can't do
people,
anything, but we can do something about deliberate, conscious conspiracies to make something appear or something happen in a manner that is contrary to what actually happened. And
we don't
that's
have to get sidetracked. Why I don't like using the word evil,
I
and
do.
because
I'll
the
call it evil.
implication. Because you're saying like, okay, there's usually rules of morals, but
There is moral.
something's evil
Yes,
that goes beyond the normal rules of.
we have to identify evil. Yes, I would say that, and I have identified it in this
But I
case.
mean, saying okay, I mean, if you mean George Soros is evil, you mean the
Yes,
25% of
Soros.
American leftist Jews that I mean, we know
No, I don't
that.
think that all leftists.
I told you,
Well,
like
I
what
think
happened in
those-
Michigan did not happen
Well,
this last week. It happened over decades. The
let me be clear. I'm
2018
not saying that
public
all
initiative to have mail-in voting passed widely and was popular. And people like
No,
George
it's,
Soros, yes, they did fund it. Tens of thousands of Jews, maybe not tens, hundreds, thousands of Jews were actively involved in getting that passed. If you're looking at who was
and I'm
active,
not saying they're evil.
so you're saying that my Jewish friends are evil.
They're
So
misguided. They're not evil. They're not consciously engaging in an evil activity.
I mean, they consciously knew that they wanted Biden to win, and the way to do that was to increase voter registration.
That's
So they
fine.
took money from questionable characters who helped them create organizations. They passed legislation in various states. I mean, in the same way like the Koch brothers and Stand Your Ground laws,
Yeah, and I don't
you
think
have the
that's evil.
leftist
I never said
organizations.
that. That's their
like,
right.
I mean, so
What-
they
what
didn't just
evil
steal
is
the
that they
election this
consciously-
week. They planned on it since 2016, and they've been
Wait, are
planning
you
on it.
saying they planned on stealing the election using false votes and
No, I'm saying they planned on legally
then
stealing
that's
the
fine.
election.
I don't say that.
You're saying it's not
That's
evil
fine. That's
to
what
say
happened. I respect that.
if George Soros gave tens of millions of dollars to get ballot initiatives passed across the U.S.
George
that
Soros
allowed mail-in voting.
you're portraying it a little bit nicer than what his agenda was, I would suggest. But I'm not saying that average leftists are evil. I think they may be misguided, and I would debate them. But they're well-meaning, and they want to see an honest election. They want to register people to vote for Biden. I have no problem with that. That's legitimate. That's fine. Where it crosses a line for either side. I mean, if this were, no one's saying this about the Trump people, but if it were true, is if they conspire to do something illegally by putting votes in there that don't exist, like votes from the graveyard or votes from people who are not registered out of state, and in order to win an election, because there's a reason why that's a crime. You know, we have a system of justice in this country for those things. But to advocate that Biden win, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with groups going out and registering people to vote. That's absolutely in their right. They're not evil. Leftists are not evil. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that people who conspire to use the system to subvert the system, either by open brute force or by use of subversion, to make something appear other than it is, that's evil. I don't think most leftists do that. I think most leftists, in my opinion, might be misguided. They might have bought into this. They've been seduced by a lot of propaganda. They may say the same thing about me. Fine, we should have the debate in public, but they're not evil. I've never said that. What I'm saying is that a deliberate and conscious attempt to steal an election, and one that is coordinated across various states and the media, that's evil if people are involved in it consciously and they know what they're doing. And I think there are a lot of people who do know what they're doing and have performed this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would agree and believe in conspiracy in general. I mean, I believe in God, but you say, yes, we know that there are tens of countries and hundreds of non-governmental organizations that actively act against the interest of the United States, not necessarily, so to say, because they're evil, but because their interest is in conflict with the United States interest. Those, and if
If
you
they
want to
do it
include
honestly, I have no problem with it. If
what I'm
they
saying, so those entities might help people that are just trying to register. So if you look at Biden, to me, he seems kind of incompetent. I don't think Biden really mastermind his own rise. There's
Yeah, he's
other
just a
people.
puppet.
And so if you
He
look,
doesn't even, has obviously is dementia. I mean, he can't even put a sentence together.
yeah, so if you look, like Russia's goal is to sow discord in the US in order to make our country weaker so that we can't negatively impact their country in the way they see that. So Russia figures they'll help out Joe Biden. And so, and at the same time, George Soros has his own interest and he's helping out Joe Biden. And maybe the Chinese government is helping out Joe Biden. And maybe, maybe Iran and a whole bunch of various forces, and they're all doing various things. So, and there's a combination of legal and possibly illegal activity. The legal activity, has been done by brilliant masterminds like George Soros, who probably for 20 years has been funding organizations that have been pushing for mail-in voting and has the organization. So when election came, there were tens of thousands of Democrats in Michigan that were getting paid to encourage people to vote, and to the levels of what is fraud, if people are filling out forms, if people are fake ballots, if you're talking about votes where the people, it was counted a vote for a person who didn't actually vote, and if that's the your strict definition of fraud,
That's
and
cheating.
a lesser level where let's say you pay someone to go door by door and fill out the papers for them, and
Cheating.
this, so I would say that I
How do we
doubt.
know they filled out the papers for? I mean, that, in other words, you have to have the system in place where you can have a legitimate verified vote. These other methods are there to cheat.
Well,
That's
so I would
the
see that
virtue
Trump
will of
has
the
some
people that say.
chances that they could back up, not declare it fraud, like people, there were votes counted by people who don't exist, or didn't cast a ballot, but that the methods used to extract votes out of people went against the Constitution and therefore would discard enough votes in multiple states, that's possible, that in Michigan, in
Yes.
these various cases, that they're going to show, not, and so you like evil, like when you use the word evil and fraud, like to me, like, it's okay, so let's kill each other in the street, like if there's
No.
evil. And so I'm not using those words, but you're saying that there was varying degrees of people who really wanted Biden to win, to people who did everything within the law and
Fine. If
legally,
they did it within the
to
law, I respect that. The
to
question is those who went outside the law. Now, look, I mean, this is, the whole idea, by the way, in 2004, the Jimmy Carter Center in Atlanta put together a blue ribbon commission, a bipartisan commission, co-chaired by former President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James A. Baker, that studied the issue of mail-in ballots and voting. And after a deliberative and prolonged piece of research, I think it took them about a year, they came to the conclusion that it was rife with potential fraud. And they issued a report that was published in 2005. I think that that's something that we should look to. It is a system. And by the way, I'm not saying that it maybe shouldn't have happened in some cases because of the COVID-19 virus, although we've already have a system in place for someone who doesn't feel comfortable going to the polling place because of the virus, putting aside that they probably would go to a grocery store, which would expose them even more. Let's just put that aside. If they really felt vulnerable to do it, they can order an absentee ballot. That's a system that's been in place for the last 100 years. That's what I did. That's what my family did. You get an absentee ballot. They verify your address. They send you the ballot. You have a signature on file at the clerk's office, and then you sign it at home. You put it in a double envelope, and it is all done with proper verification. The system is in place. There's no reason to have to mail out millions of ballots randomly to people who are just simply appearing on a voter roll, but they may not be alive. People's cats are voting. It's rife with potential fraud, I would suggest. But since it's happened, now we have in Pennsylvania the fact that they allowed the voting day to stay open an extra couple of days. The Supreme Court has gotten involved. The U.S. Constitution in black and white says that the state legislatures shall decide the manner of vote and the day of the vote. Well, the state legislature in Pennsylvania said that voting had to end on election day. Election day was election day. And the liberal governor in that state overrode it and got the state Supreme Court, which is made up of liberal judges, to back that up. So that is a question that's going to be looked at by the Supreme Court. Already, Justice Alito has said that the state has to segregate votes that were cast after Election Day from Election Day. And we're talking about possibly upwards of 500,000 votes. And that the Supreme Court ultimately is going to decide. I would suggest that the Supreme Court will decide unanimously to uphold that decision because it's black and white in the Constitution. This would be like whether or not they're asked to claim that the president has a 5-year term instead of a 4-year term. It's not ambiguous. There's nothing in there up for interpretation. So I think that that's going to give, once they disqualify those votes, that's going to give Pennsylvania to Trump.
Yeah, I mean, you may be right, your analysis there. And I see, it needs a pathway to the Supreme Court in multiple states. And, so it's a handful of elites, basically, that could turn the election. And whether, obviously...
Well, it's sad that it's come to that, but the fact is that the laws were violated in that state. They went against the Constitution by saying you can keep voting after Election Day, even though the Constitution says that the legislature decides, and the legislature said no. That's how the system works. That's why we have representative government. Those legislators were elected by the people of that state. They have the legal authority to make that decision as the representatives of the people, and they did. To overthrow that simply by fiat, that's sheer power grab. That should be illegal. And if it's not viewed as illegal, then we have a big problem in this country.
Well, yeah, we got big problems in this country no matter what. And
I'm talking about constitutional problems.
I said we got big constitutional problems no matter what.
Agreed.
And I don't think, figuring out, who won or what ballots and saying, yeah, corruption's the norm. Unfortunately, I was thinking this insurance agent, still friends with him on Facebook. He told me once, when I was younger, day trading, that lower levels, it's about at lower levels and higher levels, it's about 50-50 in corruptions, and at mid-level management, corruptions like in the high 90s. Basically, it's about 50-50 any given person for to be corrupt, and it could be a person, periods of corruption. One person could be not corrupt for years and then become corrupt. But at mid-level management, unfortunately, everybody's basically corrupt. And it's, do I really care to figure this out? Like, I want to live in a just society. I want to be a good person. I want to be charitable. I want, my dreams and fantasies to come true. But like, no, I don't really care to investigate the elections. It'll have its process, and maybe, if it gets to enough state Supreme Courts and the law, it's demonstrated, and there could be corruption on that ruling. But this is why I don't really like politics. I'm not against it, because you say, okay, your general concern is to be a good person and to make society better, and you avow yourself to the political process of supporting a candidate, and then seeing to it that the elections were fair. But from my perspective, like, I just don't see it. Like, I don't really care whether it's Trump or Biden. I think both of those people are largely negative. Whether there was corruption in the voting, it wouldn't surprise me. Whether we're going to get to the bottom of it, and I say, like, yeah, I think we need a constitutional. I've been. In fact, I'm going to talk with Ed Dutton. Someone mentioned my name in one of his shows, and he's going to be on my channel next Tuesday. But I've been one of the people that think the federal government is probably going to collapse. I mean, I've been saying that from the deficits or various
That's a very
reasons.
negative view.
Well, well,
I believe the system will survive even with Biden in there because I think that we have a diffusion of power. Let's not forget that the Republicans are holding on to the U.S. Senate because the Alaska just confirmed the victory for a Republican senator, and that they gained in the House. I mean, I think already the House majority, Democrat majority, is down to like a razor thin number, probably about 5 or 6 seats. So, plus we've got the Supreme Court with enough federal judges, enough justices who actually are patriotic and they look at the Constitution. They're not going to make it up as they go. So I think that all of these factors, plus the state across the board, has gone Republican, including most state legislatures. If Biden wins, then it's going to be a balance of power. The radicals are not going to be able to get very far, and I think that the tide will turn even further 2 years from now. That's how our system works. That's what's called that's participatory.
yeah, I realize that, but it's saying after
Democracy.
2 years of arguing with the alt right, like Luke Ford and the counter Semites, and saying, yeah, I think that demographic change and immigration are the main, not the main issues, but they're really huge issues that have caused the country to reach a breaking point. And if it's, if you want to look at segregation, uh, the full level of segregation, but at the level now of the multicultural pro-immigration society we're becoming in the red and blue state, there's really no way to keep the status quo. It's like Israel, I mean, and the Palestine. You say like, so at this point, Biden or Trump is just maintenance of the status quo. And from my perspective, the status quo is a ticking time bomb. And I think it's reached that case in America, like also.
And Trump stands against that status quo. This is Biden is a.
I don't see that. I'm saying he's part of the system. He is. I mean, Trump is maintaining the status quo.
He's holding up against it. The status quo is gradually turning the United States into a province of the world, and as a socialistic, big government country. I mean, Trump is standing up to that, and that's why they hate Trump. That's why they.
Biden was standing up to that also. I'm saying, Bernie Sanders, like, I mean, if not the conspiracy, but Biden and the Democrats conspired to steal the election for Bernie Sanders.
I agree.
My grandparents were socialists. My grandfather's grandfather was a rabbi for the workmen's circle. I like Bernie Sanders. I'm not political. I'm more libertarian. But it's saying that's the faction and fissure. That's saying the status quo is unmaintainable because there's a huge faction in society that's demanding socialism.
I feel
there's
very
a huge
Jews are breaking from this finally. Thank God, they're waking up to numbers, and I think it's going to continue to grow. Jews are becoming more like they're more consistent to the whole nature of Jewish faith and understanding. I would argue. You may argue otherwise, but I'm encouraged by the this election and the numbers that I've seen. So this rabbi who wrote this article in the Times of Israel, it's the same old cliches. Trump is a mean guy. He's rude. He's crude. So Jews are supposed to be against him for that. I mean, this is what it comes down to, really? Personality? I mean, I don't know. Is Trump so rude and crude? I mean, Biden basically called Trump a Nazi. I think that was rather rude. I mean, you want to talk about rude and crude. Trump may not talk with this phony British accent, with the clipped intellectual pseudo sophistry that the left uses. But he's, we could look about rude and crude. I mean, he speaks very honestly. And I think that's where the left doesn't, they don't get that. They don't understand that that's his appeal. People are tired of the double talk and the sophistries that emanate out of somebody like Obama or Biden, where they don't say anything and they do it gloriously. I remember this comment from Donna Shalala. She was Secretary of Housing, I think, in the Clinton administration. And she said the one thing she learned when she arrived in Washington was that a good politician has to say nothing, but do it gloriously and do it beautifully and use lots of big words. It's a form of deception. It's a Masonic form of deception that politicians use, a form of double talk, a kind of almost a code language. Trump doesn't do that. this rabbi's right. He does not conform to those norms. He does speak plainly, and he does speak honestly. That doesn't mean he doesn't tell an occasional fib, but for the most part, he blurts it out in all of its crudeness at times, and I think that's why he connects.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly like. I don't even find Trump interesting anymore. And like I even knew people who like I was doing business with people directly doing business with Trump. It
You mean
doesn't
because
even.
they were mobsters in New York? That's unfair because New York.
No, these were Hasidic Jews, Orthodox Jews, and
I'm
even
sure, but I mean,
relatively,
that's
Trump was
unfair
a
because
minor player compared to.
anyone in real estate in New York has to do business with mobbed up companies because that's who owns the docks, that's who owns construction, that's who owns the infrastructure. That doesn't make them corrupt. I mean, you could say that about anyone in New York.
Well, I didn't mean corrupt. I was saying like Donald
Well, you
Trump is
implied
just.
it when you were saying that Trump had done business with mafia companies. I mean, that doesn't make him mobbed up at all. I don't think he is.
Well, I said the opposite. I was saying like basically everyone. I was saying I did.
Oh, well,
Just getting in the work world, you can't get a job.
well,
Like on Wall Street or in construction. Not
that's
like
right.
obviously Trump. But I'm saying just on the low level. Um, and it depends how you define mafia, but it's so dominant that you basically have to team up with them, and all Jews in various forms are teamed up. In its neighborhood wise, like if you're in Borough Park,
Well,
you
not
live
just
right next to
Jews. I mean,
the.
anyone in New York who does business in real estate or in certain industries does business with corrupt companies. And I think that if anything, Trump knows this and he knows how it works, which is all the more reason why we need him as an advocate. He's not naive about this. He knows how to take him on. He's obviously a tough guy. And by the way, those people are all uniformly anti-Trump, I'm sure. I mean, this is, I would be shocked to hear otherwise.
Yeah, I'm saying there's a nature of New York real estate and dealing with tough guys
Right.
to the academia halls, and people in the academia halls. There aren't. I mean, you remember the movie is one of my childhood favorites, Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield.
No, I know I've seen enough clips of him, but no.
It's kind of a silly movie. Just
Yeah.
he goes back to school as a grown man
Oh, I think I've seen clips of that.
and but it's saying like that's kind of like Trump, and he's not a groomed, polished guy like the people in the halls of academia or government.
Exactly, and that's why he's great.
Well, I mean, for you, but he's saying like, no, there's a reason why people in the halls of academia and government are polished.
And their
It's
politics are
saying,
also out of touch with real realities. I mean, they sit in the ivory tower and they talk about economics when they've never actually run a company. They've never paid taxes. They've never balanced a checkbook or had a payroll. They sit there with all these abstract ideas and they spout neo-Marxist ideas. They're not living under that system. The rest of us are going to have to.
yeah, I mean, so it's a fissure of society that
It is.
maybe
It's a fissure
can't be
between
can't
reality.
saying, oh, so we're gonna put someone like Trump in charge of academia, they'll solve everything.
No.
It's like,
It's
no, I don't think that's gonna
between
solve anything.
normal people and an elite, and this elite is not. I mean, and look, we could get into. I actually did a chapter on this in my book, God is God, which I just published. That they're not in touch with regular reality. They're people who either work their way up in a system by selling themselves out to a certain extent, or they're born wealthy, or they're just, they're not in touch with real things. So they feel privileged. They feel like they have some kind of an enlightened mission to control everyone else who's less than them. It's based on guilt, and it's a false guilt. In some cases, it's a real guilt. They should feel guilty. But this is what Trump is standing up against, and this is what his movement is about. The liberals don't understand that. And it's not going to go away, even if Trump, God forbid, is not sworn in. And I think he's going to be sworn in, by the way. But even if he's not, this isn't going away. There have been great gains. It's almost miraculous to me that he was able to step in there at great personal sacrifice. I mean, this rabbi has a nerve in this article you sent me, the Times of Israel. He says Trump personally financially gained from being president. No, I don't think so. I think Trump has lost money. His daughter was put out of business. She had to shut her doors. When you get involved in politics, either left or right, by the way, you lose money because you're going to piss off half your constituency. He hasn't made money from this.
Yeah, I mean,
financially gained in any way. He's hurt himself financially. And
I don't know if that was the point to criticize Trump. It was to criticize Jews for supporting him or for
gain personally while in office, which is a lie.
You know, I would agree that rabbi, I mean, Rabbi Lau has the poor man's perspective. Most rabbis have a poor man's perspective. I mean, it's kind of related to capitalism and the crudeness. Is saying you do business and deals with who has the money when the check clears. You don't do business with the nicest guy. And if the nicest guy is broke, he's ineligible for the deal.
And you don't talk nice all the time when you're talking about truths. It doesn't always come out nice. That's why Trump won. He wasn't like Mitt Romney, who played ball with the elites and who spoke.
Yeah, but that's the draw of socialism over capitalism. That Trump is the product of capitalism, and this crudeness is demonstrative of this thing that people dislike and want to change about society.
Love. And it's great. That's what this country is. We're a capitalist country.
Well, in your opinion,
business people, small. This is the first society. This is something that Dinesh D'Souza makes a point on, and he does a very good job, in that the United States is the first society in history that, whether it be Europe, India, Asia, that honors businessmen, that honors merchants and entrepreneurs. In all other societies, including
besides the Jews,
they are looked down upon as a lower class people. In the United States, we honor them. We're the first society in history that does so. And Trump embodies that. He's the manifestation of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, honestly, the Trump, I don't think there's that much to learn from him. I'm not that interested in the politics. I told Luke Ford, because we'd been doing Torah, that we stopped for like a month because he was getting good viewership and he was active in covering the campaign. And the day after the elections, you want to go back to Torah, you want to wait till it's done. And then I said, like, if not now, when? This might drag on for months and months of this election thing. So maybe we should just go back.
By the way, he seems like he's pissed off at me. I'm not sure why, but
no, I mean he's got his own way of working with people. I'm not sure. It might just be. I doubt it. I think.
My show, and for some reason we had cross signals. I mean, I was waiting for him. He didn't. I might have been wrong. Maybe I didn't send him the Zoom link or something. But he was very huffy about it, and then he won't come back. Whatever. I hope he does.
Yeah, I mean, he's somewhat like a radio professional. He might have his little quirks, like if something like you wronged him, now he doesn't want to do it in some small way.
I apologize.
But I'm not sure. I mean, he's a pretty professional. I imagine you just a miscommunication or something.
Yeah, I think so.
But just mentioning that this might not be over, and mentioned the path of the just, the Ram Call many times now. That great minds are rare. And of the people with great minds, the people that dedicate those great minds to spiritual topics are very rare. And people with great minds, will dedicate it to making money, to law, to academic issues, but to dedicate that to spiritual or higher pursuits. I mean, but like honestly, I don't think there's that much to learn from Trump. Saying the direction, our obligation to society, and we basically know everything about Trump. You might like his style of leadership or greater. There's a lot of people who don't. And to me, it's just dumb to argue about it again and again. And it's a flaw in the system. The flawed, because we probably agree the fallen nature of humanity in general, that it's not surprising to me, even though I largely look at, Trump's an exceptional man, but if I look at him in a negative way, and I'm not his judge, I'm not looking at Trump in a negative way, because I don't really judge people. God will judge Trump, but whatever my inclinations are, I don't want to waste my time thinking about Trump all day. And it doesn't mean I don't want to be a good citizen, but and like Biden doesn't really interest me that much either. And so I'm looking for a new path forward. It doesn't really exist. And so just this push, like Trump won, Biden won, to me, it's just like torture. It's a reminder of the broken society that we currently exist in.
Torturous because we don't have the answer yet, and I hope that resolves itself.
Yeah, but the answer's not going to help me. You say I'm not going to be happy like Biden or Trump. Like honestly, I don't really care which one of them it is.
Fine. I do care. I'm not going to make any bones about it. I want Trump to win, and I think he did win because I don't want to see a stolen election. And plus, I support him. But what I would say in that context is that if it turns out that he was defeated, then I'll accept that. I'm not going to be like the left and say, "Oh, he's not my president." But I want to see get to the bottom of whether or not there was enough fraud that the election was stolen. I still think that while it's not known, evidence is mounting that that is what happened, and I want that exposed because that is a subversion of the will of the people of this country. Anyways, Dooovid, I've got Frank Mink coming on at 1 o'clock. He's a former white supremacist who went to prison. Now he's written a book, and now he's claiming that conservatives are actually the white supremacists and that Fox News is white supremacist. I may agree with him on that one, but putting that aside, um, let my listeners and viewers know where they can, get in touch with you and listen to your excellent podcast and YouTube channel.
Yeah, very interesting. I appreciate you having me on. And, I don't think this saga is coming to a close anytime short. So I appreciate your research and journalism. Like you and Luke are about the only, like it's too much for me to follow, but, good for you for doing that. I'm Dooovid on YouTube and Reb Dooovid on Twitter. And I've been producing content on chess recently because I'm doing research on consciousness and different things.
Mm-hmm.
I have some talks this Tuesday. Edward Dutton, I think the Anglo-Finnish anthropologist who's wrote a bunch of books, and he wrote that book on Islam as a group strategy with Richard Spencer. He's probably
He's
spoke.
very good. I've seen him on with Richard Spencer. I'd like to have him on my show to mention to him that he's invited.
Yeah, I'll mention. I mean, someone super chatted, and this guy Yehuda Finkelstein, who calls himself, and I don't. I mean, I knew Finkelsteins, but I don't know if this guy's actually Yehuda Finkelstein. But he super chatted $5 to Professor Dutton and told him to talk with Dooovid, and I tweeted at him, and
We should do a couple of three-way chats on my show with him.
so he's going to be on my channel, I think, because he's in Europe 2 o'clock on Tuesday. So looking forward to that. I'm going to tweet that out. I've been popping on the Luke Ford show every once in a while for a little bit here and there. Sunday night week in review on Church of Entropy and the Thursday 1 p.m. Eastern time with Charles. I've been enjoying that. I appreciate you having me on again.
My pleasure. All right, Dooovid, and I look forward to talking to you next week. We're doing this every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks a lot, Dooovid. Have a good one.